We can't hear Norwell. No sound coming from you guys. No coming from you guys.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Once again, we have resolved the technical challenges. We are doing this in multicast format, as I said. So we have audience online and we have viewers on UG Broadcasting Service. So I want to thank you all as we're going to get started formally now. Again, we've already had the national anthem. I want to introduce myself. My name is Norwell Hines, Civic Engagement Officer at the University of Guyana. And we consider this initiative to be particularly useful at this time and a good opportunity to demonstrate some of the innovations that the University of Guyana has been undertaking recently. I want to introduce Mr. Calvin Bernard, who is the Deputy Director of the Institute for Human Resiliency, Strategic Security and the Future here at the University of Guyana, the Deputy Director. He's a senior lecturer also and co-lead for the 60th Anniversary Committee. He holds qualifications in biology from the University of Guyana and development management from the Open University in the UK. Mr. Bernard has in the past served as a member of the University of Guyana Council, Assistant Dean for the Faculty of Natural Sciences, Head Department of Biology, Manager for the Center for the Study of Biological Diversity, Board Member for the International Society for the Study of Religion, and President of Transparency Institute Guyana, Incorporated. I want to invite Mr. Bernard to open this conversation with some remarks. Mr. Bernard?
Thank you very much, Noel, and good evening, everyone. I greet all the members of the head table area, those in the audience and those online. I'm pleased to be here to bring these very, very brief remarks on behalf of the Institute of Human Resilience, Strategic Security and the Future. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who defined democracy as government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's an interesting thing to keep in mind, of, by, and for in particular. I would emphasize for the incoming president of the Student Society. Student government, of course, is no different. It is an opportunity for persons to, of course, develop themselves as leaders and to provide very valuable service as representatives of the student body within the university community. And I think it was 1973, if I'm not mistaken, that the University Council would have taken a decision to form the University of Guyana Student Society as a formal body. And there have been, so it's about 50 years now of history in student governance at UG. And that is something to take very good note of. I know that some of my colleagues will likely speak a bit more to that, but I would say that, you know, I think student governance is a critical part of university life. I remember my days at UG in the 1990s, I'll date myself, in the 1990s, and a number of very powerful voices existed on campus. We used to have lots of, I don't even know who the parties are now, that if people are running from parties on campus, but we used to have these parties that existed. And it was a fierce competition to provide leadership to the student body. I was mentioning to my colleague that I had a very, very brief stint in UG student governance politics back in the 1990s. I think it was about 1996 or something like that, and never again. But I think over the years, we've got this rich history of student governance and the quote unquote politics surrounding student governance at the university. And we've traditionally been electing the leaders of the student body, the president and the rest of the executive by the physical ballot coming to various polling places around campus and voting. I remember the rooms specifically in my faculty that have been used over the years. But now we've entered into a time where, most of our students are not even on campus. Most days they're dispersed all over the country and some of them even across the world. So the student body within the university, the 10,000 plus students, are no longer resident in Guyana exclusively and not present on campus. And so the university had no choice but to shift the way in which it does its student body election. And up comes this new innovation that I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about later in this program, that has allowed our students to be able to exercise their franchise, to have their voice heard in terms of their choice for student body governance, and to do so in a way that is fair and representative, and to ensure that that all those who would like to exercise that franchise would have had that opportunity. I believe in doing this, we're setting an example, testing the waters, so to speak, as to what is possible beyond the university, what can be possible in other areas. I know there are some small clubs that for example, within my faculty that have tried this in various ways. And I'm sure there are lots of lessons to be learned from this larger scale elections in this mode. So I think this is a time for us to reflect, an opportunity to reflect and to learn from the process that has unfolded. And for that, I think the Institute of Human Resiliency, Strategic Security in the Future is very pleased to be associated with this conversation. And with these brief remarks, I would say, let's GYAFF.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bernard. Mr. Bernard, unfortunately, has to move on to another activity, but I'm sure because we're multicasting, he can join online as a member of the audience, continue to be a member of the audience, and he can also view on UG Broadcasting Service. I'm very excited that we're also broadcasting on the UG Broadcasting Service. I want to also mention that I had a little stint in student government myself. I was a student body president myself, and therefore was involved in student government and student elections. I would like to say that in my time, we had some innovations ourselves in the campaigning process. We didn't have innovation so much in the election technology, but we did have innovation in the way we campaigned in that particular year. This question of student government is therefore really an important conversation about how we train up young people. And I want to invite Mr. Kadasi Sires, who is sort of our resident expert on government and public policy here at the University of Guyana. He has lectured in this area for more than 18 years here at UG's Department for Government and International Affairs in the Faculty of Social Sciences. His lectures cover such topics as introductory politics, Caribbean politics, and third world and comparative politics. Mr. Sires also lends his expertise to political processes and international relations in Guyana and the region. He's a well-known consultant who has supported local government, governance, and international diplomacy. Kadasi is also an avid football fan. I can venture a guess about which team he is rooting for in the World Cup, but I wouldn't do so. I allow him to say or bet on this forum. Mr. Sires, please, you have the opportunity to make some remarks.
Thank you very much, Norwell. I don't know if I can tell you my team for the World Cup. I mean, I usually tell my friends that once I see attractive football, interesting football, because my Brazil doesn't automatically get my support like most other Guyanese, but it's a very interesting tournament so far. Now, what we're talking about this evening here is about I will try my best not to rehash what my colleagues what Mr. Bernard would have said, or Norwell. It is really important that for us to understand the role of technology. And I know that some of the things that I'm going to be saying, or most of the things I'm going to be saying, that you already know about the role of technology. Every day, you look around, you use it every day. So it's really something just to bring some of those ideas together. And within the context of University of Guyana, and the election process, etc. And perhaps what those things mean for Guyana, and how as a people we might want to embrace or learn from some of the things that we see in that process. Now, when you talk about technology, obviously it is a force for good. It is also it can be used in very, very negative ways. But of course, in trying to harness that technology, that's always important. And my colleague, Mr. Paris is going to tell you, a lot more about, the technical details, etc. But it's important to understand that, when it comes to technology, there's so many things that we can use it for. And as a result of, understanding, the role of technology in today's environment, we see the, how central, the paramount, how paramount the role of technology in the lives of young people. And I'm not saying that it's only young people who attend university, but we see the importance of, or we can acknowledge the importance of of technology, the role of the internet, etc. And those things are really, really important because when it comes to understanding it from a political standpoint, students have to find avenues, to voice their concerns. Student organizations have to be legitimate organizations. How do we renew the mandate, right? When it comes to, a world that our lives have been massively disrupted, over the past, 2 years. Now, there are new, in this new normal, what we're talking about is that, we see so many things have changed. Whether for better or for worse, that's another thing. You can make up your minds there. But for example, new learning methods. How we learn in the classroom. And it's well, we all had to adjust because some of us, some of us lecturers, would have already started that. I was one of those lecturers. Who didn't do, who didn't know anything about putting exams on internet, Moodle, etc. But I've had to come up to speed very, very quickly. Now the thing is, we have to understand as well how our student body, our student population, how they have responded, right? How how they have coped with everything about about COVID. And I am not gonna bore you with all the stories that I've heard over the years, in terms of how our student population has had to cope with, with the issues, relating to, the COVID and the new normal, etc. So, it is all part of a broader, if you look at society as a whole, right, in terms of how we embrace technology. And, UG is no different, of course. We like to talk about UG being, microcosm, Guyana, right? And it is no different. If you look at, for example, at our banking sector, our larger financial sector, you see how many changes, very, very simple changes, that, people like me saying that they're going to do this all the time, right? But, we live in a different environment now, and, we have to learn to adjust, to all of these, areas, etc. Now, I was looking, this afternoon, I was looking at internet, penetration and, internet connectivity rates, across the world. And, that's a very, very important issue because, if we're talking about our students, having access to, the technology, and using that technology, right, to ensure that we're able to, to progress, to go forward, we have to, that is a really, really serious problem. And, of course, the lecturers, and the students can tell you so many times, about the disruptions during classes, etc. But that is, those are some of the issues that we, that we faced. Now, if you look at the role of government as well, I mean, Norwell would have mentioned that I'm a part of the Department of Government and International Affairs. I mean, so that, I'm not going to talk about anything without talking about government. And if you're talking about governance, I mean, especially in a Caribbean setting, you understand the importance of the role of government, in those societies, right? So that when you look at under the guise of fighting a public health emergency, what governments have done. I mean, how some of them have arrogated to themselves so many powers and etc. Which of course, I mean, now that COVID is not as intense, for want of a better word, they have not seen it fit, I mean, to return some of those. But that's another discussion for another time. So I'm saying all of that to say that, look, how do young people get their news? Right? How do they, how are they informed? I mean, how are they kept abreast? How do they choose, to keep abreast, I mean, of what is happening? I mean, those, all of those things are really, really important. As, even here, we've had to learn. I mean, we've had to learn when the students are going to tell you, look, sir, send it, send it through some. I'm like, no, but I can't do that. I mean, I have to send it to, to email and like, sir, you know what? It's better if you get a WhatsApp group because you know what? If, the speed with which you can communicate with students. And of course, I mean, the speed, and actually communicating with students is really, really important. It's really, really important because we want to get students' feedback, in terms of, some of the decisions that are being made, which of course will affect them, right? So when you're talking about governance, etc., I mean, and, principles of good governance, I mean, all of those things are really, really important. I am trying to stick to my, time limit. So, just bear with me. How students mobilize for action, I mean, in this and, in this new normal, right? I mean, it's really, really important. I mean, they're able to mobilize because, as a collective, I mean, the students, we know that, they can bring, significant, very, very significant, analysis, etc., to the issues that we're facing, and we can work these things out together. University and the management or the administration of the university, as well as the students. I mean, and the student population as a whole. If you look at universities all over the world, I mean, they've been breeding grounds for change. I mean, and if you should we talk about China? Should we talk about Iran? I mean, and all these other young places where universities, I mean, and by extension, young people. Right, I mean, they take a leading role. I mean, and it's good to see the University of Guyana using or embracing, I mean, such technology. I mean, and what it holds for Guyana. I mean, is very, very important to me for us to, sit and consider. And we, the students will, will determine whether, that the new technology, I mean, and what it does, etc. I mean, if these things are just going to be focused on, let's say, the immediate student issues, fees and grades, etc., or they lead to broader issues, I mean, or to broader areas, I mean, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to governance, etc., right? They will, determine that. And, using the system that was, that was designed and, work to the, for the students' benefit, that's really, really important because, the past president of the UGSS, is an IR student. And, and oftentimes, I mean, if I see him, well, whenever I see him, I'm like, do you still, enjoy the legitimacy of, being president since when? Right. I mean, but because no elections, I mean, as a result of the absence of, certain, procedures, I mean, we can put in place, how do you feel about that? We would, generally talk about it, but, it's something that is really good. And, I am sure that there are lessons that the university, can teach the wider community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Siraz, for your remarks. I think it was very, very useful to set the context, the broad context in which we have in this conversation. And just to remind you who are viewing online, who are viewing on UG Broadcasting Service, that this conversation is sort of it is what it is. And we know colloquially in Guyana what we mean when we say a GYAFF. So it's really a GYAFF conversation. It's intended to be light, but useful. So we want to thank you, Mr. Ceres, for that overview, which really helps to set a stage for us. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we're going through the program today. So we just heard from Mr. Ceres, who's sort of an expert in this field. The next segment, we will hear from folks who were involved in the actual management of the UGSS elections. Then we will hear from the candidates themselves. And finally, we hear from another expert, an expert who can help to maybe put all of that into a grand context for us. So that's sort of how we're going to flow through this light but useful conversation. I also want to take the opportunity to say that our Vice Chancellor is online and is viewing the event. So I'm sorry, but if Vice Chancellor had another activity this evening, and she does send her regards as well as regret for this evening. I want to now invite Mr. Oren Paris, who is very much involved from the software and technical side of this entire process. I want to invite him to make some presentation about the technology itself. Mr. Oren Paris is the Senior ICT Engineer within the Software Services and Educational Technology Applications Unit. Very long name for that unit within the Tactical Online Services Department at the University of Guyana. Mr. Paris has more than 11 years of experience in the ICT field, in industry, e-government, and software as a service. He has worked for the University of Guyana since 2020. Mr. Paris holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from the University of Guyana and a Master of Business Administration degree. Mr. Paris, please tell us a little bit about this technology that we used before finally we get into some of the meat.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Norwell. Right, so my task this evening is to just give you some brief remarks on what would have been done and what went into selecting the solution that was used to run the University of Guyana Student Society elections for this year. All right, as Nora would have said, my name is Oren Paris and I'm from the SETA department, as we like to call it. There was a team from the SETA department who played a role in producing this solution. Our lead is actually Dominic Bram, and unfortunately, he should have been making this presentation, but he's not doing too well today. And he's actually our student intern from the computer science department. And he is a prospective graduate in our convocation 2022. Playing supporting roles were our director, deputy director, myself, and one of our junior ICT engineers. So an overview of the solution. There were some preliminaries that went into place for us to select this solution. There were multiple options that were considered and researched prior to selection, right? Potential solutions were presented to the welfare division, of who the representative is Ms. Daniela King. And the SETA, in consultation with our PACE department and the students' welfare, selected the solution. The solution that was selected is actually Election Buddy. Election Buddy boasts numerous ways to contact voters, notifications on any discrepancies that may happen during elections. They boasted high integrity in integrity voting, automated sending out of the voting requirements and requests. It was secure and private and provided real-time results. Now, these are all of interest to us because of We know this is the first time we've used an electronic solution. We know of the reservations that a lot of our candidates may have had. And so we tried to address each one of them. And I can tell you that the departments in consultation represented you guys well. They ensured that all of the areas were met and criteria. So the features of election body, I just want to let you at home know. Each time an email is sent out, and I should mention this before, election body uses a system by where you can contact all of your voters via email, it could be phone, could be SMS. So the email option was selected. We have an interface to do so, and we have a collection of student contact information. When this link is sent to students, an access key is created and sent with it. This access key only allows for one vote. Using that access key, once it's consumed, it cannot be used again. The key is actually generated by the system. The administrator has no role to play. The results are available at the end of the elections to the administrator of the elections, which would be our department. Our progress is available during elections. We can see how many votes have been cast, and the voters cannot be linked back to their vote. So it's completely anonymous. However, if one of our voters decides they'd like to confirm whether or not their vote was received, they actually receive a confirmation code by which they can send it back to us, and we can confirm whether that vote was collected. The downside of election body, one of the drawbacks, is that the email that is sent to an elector can be shared with someone else. That was one of the main drawbacks, and that person could be voted for elsewhere. But then again, let's keep in mind, they can only vote once. So it's not like one voter could have voted and then send their email on to someone else for them to vote again. That is not possible. So let me just cover the features of our elections. It began on the 24th of November at 10 hours. The list of electors was actually derived from student registrations in our resident SRMS, which is our student records management system. We applied a cutoff date and time in order to have this information in. Election body does not allow you to run any elections with any discrepancy in the voter list or contact details. And therefore, any last minute additions may have posed problems for the successful running of such. And so the cutoff date was actually 36 hours before, which is November 22nd at 10 p.m. The persons were emailed all along the way, advising them on how they can vote, the fact that they should ensure that their email addresses are proper and they are valid. And just before the elections or on election time, the election body actually sends out these emails to all of the legitimate email addresses. And if an email could not reach a voter for any reason, such as a closed mailbox or the mailbox is full, that would be reported to us. And the elections were concluded at 7 p.m., 19 hours on November 24th. After this, those results were actually sent to the Students' Welfare within the hour, post the end of the elections. So there's a couple of things in terms of reports. Election body does allow for some demographics, sorry. It was only allowed 3 actually. So we took them on faculty, the year level that the student was in, and their gender. Just so we know that election body actually takes anonymity very seriously, we were only able to pull the report for gender. Why is this? There wasn't enough information in terms of cross-faculty participation to be able to generate the on-faculty or year level any reports. For that would have narrowed down the idea of who voted when. Also, initially, when the election was started, we had about a little over 1,000 votes within the first few hours, actually, the first 2 hours. And it started to kind of dwindle into the midway of the election. And towards the end, there were about 600, I believe, votes that came in closer to the 7 o'clock hour. election body is actually used by quite a few clients, other universities. They should be on your screen. There's, Thompson Rivers University, University of Alberta, there should be Canadian University. So we ensure that we vetted this solution very well. And that actually ends my presentation. I don't want to overload you with too much information. I'll leave the rest of it for the GYAFF. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Um, thank God we had all those technical people to understand. But in particular, I remember having conversations with some of the young people who were involved and the team that was working on this. And some of those questions in particular, we wanted to be very sure that they had a very deep understanding of the technology completely. And more particularly, that we could ensure that there were these safeguards. And I'm glad that you were able to refer to some of those safeguards. Although a person could share the email, nobody could vote more than once. That was very, very important to us, ensuring that there was that kind of integrity in the process. Ms. King, Ms. Daniela King, who is the senior registrar, the senior assistant registrar here at the University of Guyana, couldn't be here herself in person. The university is, of course, preparing for graduation at the moment, and therefore she asked whether she could send her presentation as a video. So we are going to play that now, and that gives you an overview of the election process and how the technology was situated in that process. Be here herself in person. The university is, of course, preparing for graduation at the moment, and therefore she asked whether she could send her presentation as a video. So we are going to play that now, and that gives you an overview of the election process and how the technology was situated in that process. Be here herself in person. The university is, of course, preparing for
Good evening.
graduation at
I'd
the
like to say
moment,
thank you
and
for
therefore
inviting me
she
to be a
asked
part
whether
of
she
this
could
program,
send her
and I
presentation
regret
as
that I'm not
a
able to
video.
join you live. My
So
name
we
is
are going
Daniela
to
King, as
play
you may
that
have
now,
heard, and I'm the
and
Senior
that
Assistant
gives
Registrar
you
with
an
responsibility
overview
for
of the election
conducting
process and how the
registration.
technology
I am pleased to
was
bring to
situated in
you
that
a
process.
recap
Be here herself
of
in
the
person.
process that we just concluded, where the University of Ghana for the first time utilized online software to conduct the University of Ghana Student Society's elections. And that was, of course, delivered online. Before I delve into the lessons and takeaways from this historic experience, allow me to recap the typical election process. For the UGSS elections, we normally have pre, peri, and post activities. In the pre-election activities phase of events, we begin normally by setting a timeline for the conduct of the exercise. And this is informed by the UGSS Constitution, which states that all subsequent elections of the UGSS body shall normally take place within the first 4 weeks of the beginning of classes for a new academic year. Once the timeline has been decided on for elections, we send out our call for nominations for the post of president and 3 faculty representatives for faculty. In setting the timeline, we set a nomination day deadline by which all nominations should be turned in. During the pre-elections activities period, we also budget for this exercise. We recruit staff and we train the election day staff. And these staff members are usually staff members of the University of Guyana. But as this activity is extra work, their normal work within the institution, they are paid as E-Day staff and treated as contracted personnel for the day. We place a lot of emphasis in other logistical activities, such as preparing the ballot, coordinating with the Ghana Elections Commission for the loan of actual ballot boxes, and a myriad of other logistics for the runoff of this exercise. With everything in place during the pre the following the pre elections day activities on elections day itself, E-Day, the office works to ensure that everything runs and flows according to the plan that we have set up. We are responsible on E-Day for troubleshooting incidents or issues which arise. And of course, at the end of the day of voting, we close our polls and we proceed to tabulate the results of the elections exercise. After elections, we tabulate our results and we proceed to make a declaration of those results to the students of the university who would have voted and the public in general. It should be noted that the UGSS Constitution stipulates that the president alone shall be elected by a simple majority vote, and that the faculty representatives must have obtained at least one-sixth of the total number of faculty votes that are cast in the exercise. And the final activity we conduct post elections normally would be the installation of the new Executive Council of the UGSS. All of the activities described in the previous slides were in a system and during a time where our activities were labor intensive. Polls were held at the respective campuses. We were required to have elections over several days, three to be exact, so that we allow all the students from all of the campuses and programs to exercise their franchise. So here we are having come out at the end of the use of technology, and we would like to see whether this was useful or not going forward. Now, it's important that in discussing the lessons that we learned from this current exercise, that we recall that it is not new that we have experimented with the use of technology in the UGSS elections process. In fact, in 2014, the University of Guyana was approached by a non-profit organization, Dillian, who assisted the institution and this office in the runoff of the use of automated voter technology systems in the conduct of the 2014 UGSS elections. In that particular project, it was a technology pilot with the following objectives. It intended to undertake an academically focused research project using various election tabulation methods during a live election. It intended to test the tabulators, the automated voter technology systems that are displayed in the photo on the bottom right of your screen, in conditions that were tropical and humid. It also intended to test the security of the ballot paper in these same weather conditions, to test the transmission by satellite of results, the time that it would take to transmit those results by GSM as well, and to test as well the use of remote power sources such as motorcycle batteries or car batteries in the event of loss of power, because this may be an object, a barrier rather, a challenge to using technology in elections. And so they tested the use of remote power sources, and they also utilized this opportunity to test the rapid tabulation of results by the machines that were introduced. And that project was a resounding success. All of these goals, all of these objectives were achieved. And that I will speak a little bit more on how these systems worked. We come to that in my next slide. Now, there are several ways, several methods to conduct voting using technology, e-voting methods. These include the use of direct recording electronic computers or DREs, which are machines or computers that are installed at a physical polling station, and these record the vote, record and store the vote cast. Um, and it can be done using a touch screen with or without a designated or a specific pen or stylus, and through a device that involves pressing one or more buttons. The next way or methodology for voting, e-voting method, is voting via the internet. And voting via the internet can be done in a controlled area like a polling station, or in a non-controlled area such as how we conducted this last election exercise, strictly by the use of the internet online. So people were all over Guyana in their respective homes, students rather, and they were able to receive a link to cast their vote, and they were able to do so. There are also optical and digital scanning devices. Now, please recall my discussion on the previous use of technology in UGSS elections in 2014. The automated voter technology systems were a type of optical and digital scanning device that was utilized. Now, these devices are used in the polling stations, and they scan a preset ballot paper that improves ultimately the accuracy of the counting process. So it reduces manual counting error, and certainly it improves the turnaround time um, to tabulate large data sets. Well, not data sets, large numbers of votes, ballots cast, right? It happens in real time. And once polls are closed, we are able to rapidly retrieve a report of the votes in each system, so in each polling station. So this is the kind of technology we experimented with before and successfully too. And then we have modified DREs. So they do the same, they have the same function and operate in the same way as the digital direct recording electronic computers. But the main difference with the modified DREs is that they only allow the persons to vote. They don't store the vote there. That information still has to be registered um, on another device, right? That I think is a security feature that prevents manipulation of the memory system of the individual DRE in the polling station which may, of course, impact the outcome of the results. Okay, so in the run-up to the UGSS elections this year, we had a number of deadlines and we had a number of activities. We extended our nomination day deadline several times. The final deadline was November 14th at 4 o'clock. And then we set November 15th by noon as the deadline to withdraw candidacy. And the elections were run off on the 24th of November. Prior to elections, a number of other activities were squeezed in with the support of the PACE office. This included an informational meeting with all candidates after the nomination day and the withdrawal of nomination day passed. And then there was a specific program to train the candidates on campaigning and campaigning strategies. And then there was also a UGSS presidential candidates debate or presentation rather um, on November 22nd on the Turkine campus, but this was streamed online. So if you couldn't physically make it to the campus, you still and it was an excellent event. Lots of students participated, and these more or less were activities we were able to have in the run up to our elections this year. And we've come to the meat of the matter, lessons from this experience. Whilst I'm not going to delve into the technical aspects of things, I know that our team from the SETA, TOS, and the SETA software offices will be joining you on the program tonight, and I really do hope that they, um, take a part and explain in a way that we can all understand and relate to the technical aspects in setting up this software for use here at UG. These are the things that were key takeaways for this office that's normally responsible for coordinating the activity. First and foremost, that the software is not magic. The software really is designed for E-Day activities. That is to ensure all of the voters receive a link and they're able to cast a vote and to calculate the votes cast. So all of the pre-election activities that are normally conducted, these had to be accommodated, of course, extra software. All right. So outside of the software, those things we still needed to do. There were, of course, there were also rather limitations in what the software could do for us in terms of the reports, the output reports, and the tabulations that we wanted, um, which are required by UGSS. And I read earlier that in the case of the faculty representatives, we wanted to be able to see who the successful candidates were based on this 1/6 requirement. That could not be accommodated, and we reverted to our previous methodology, but we utilized the raw data, the raw output from the post-election report. I didn't mention this, I should mention that, and it probably came up in somebody else's presentation, that the software we utilized was Election Buddy. And it's one of many available out there, but we did extensive testing with others and we settled on and procured Elections Buddy for the UGSS elections in 2022. So there were some other limitations in the kinds of reports that we wanted. As a proprietary software, I don't know if these things are add-on, but there were limits on the kinds and the number of reports we could get from the software that we can use for research purpose and so forth. So, and ordinarily we would have gotten that from the usual, the face-to-face elections process. but we could continue to explore um, other software or this particular one that we used if perhaps it's available, but maybe at an additional cost. Now, that being said, we recognize that because we had a little bit more flexible, little bit more control over the release, obviously, of the link for persons to vote. So in the past, we set deadlines for nomination day as well as withdrawing candidacy to give enough time to the elections management team to print physical ballots. Where this is now no longer necessary, all right, um, we recognized and we did actually have a candidate who wanted to withdraw after the deadline for withdrawal passed. And technically, it could have been accommodated. And in this runoff, we made the note that for future elections exercise, if we do have those using the same kind of software, that we offer a little bit more flexibility in terms of the timeline, the deadline that we give for persons to withdraw candidacy, because the considerations are not the same in terms of time needed to update the ballot paper, right? So that's a major difference between the physical system and the electronic system. Using this software was economical. We compared the cost to run off the UGSS elections exercise last time these were held. That would have been in 2019-20. And the savings, that elections exercise came up to just what? Just below $400,000, 378,108. And the complete cost for this software was in the vicinity of $259,000. So we saw over $100,000 in savings. And of course, these monies are UGSS monies. UGSS funds their elections exercise in its entirety. And I'm sure that they will be welcoming of an alternative that, of course, is more economical. Now, and this is something that was encouraging to me as, and I'm sure to the UGSS as well. There was a boost in voter turnout. And it isn't unlike the instance in 2014 when we introduced the automated voter technology systems. That year, we saw in 2014 a 40%, over 40% increase in voter turnout when compared to 2013. And in the same way, in this year, well, our last election exercise was 2019-20 because of the pandemic and everything just went awry for the last 2 years. We weren't able to host elections. But comparing with the last UGSS elections exercise, we've actually seen an increase of 88% in voter turnout. And I have a little chart to share with you on that, and I'll do so in the next slide.
I want to thank Ms. King, a very comprehensive overview and the details of the election process. She also was able to share a little bit of the statistics. I think that's the last slide that was on the screen that you were able to see. She was sharing the overall voter turnout historically, but also some stats about this election using this very efficient technology. I wanted us to go now into hearing from the candidates themselves about their experiences of this process and this technology. Again, we have asked each of our speakers to share excited about this innovation and looking on. So we really want to hear what the candidates' experiences are. We can get right to that point where we can have some conversation about those experiences and what it might mean for the future. At this point, I want to call Mr. Jaquan Gill, the 20-year-old and very passionate young leader who's on a mission to circle around him, at least the best way that he can. He's a communication studies major here at the University of Guyana, and incidentally, of course, works in media and public relations. He's a national basketball player and captain of the UG Trojans basketball team, which was on a winning streak quite recently. Congratulations on that. Mr. Gill firmly believes that to change the world, you must start with yourself. He's the president-elect candidate among the candidates. The recently concluded historic University of Guyana Student Society elections. Mr. Gill, I want to give you the opportunity to share your experiences. Good evening, all. Let me first take the opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude for the opportunity to be here and the opportunity to speak to just a few minutes on my experience during the presidential campaigning and as well as the election day and the leading of the GYAFF elections. So, my team and I would look like in a hybrid environment. We understood first and foremost that campaigning cannot take the same look as it did in previous elections. For elections that I've been told about, candidates walk in Or, or apology, there was some technical trouble just now. The folks who are joining us online indicated that they weren't hearing Mr. Gill, as he shared very importantly about his experience. So, Mr. Gill, I want to invite you once again. Again, Mr. Gill is a communication studies major here at the University of Guyana. He works in media and public relations. He's a national basketball player and captain of the UT Trojans basketball team. Mr. Gill is the president-elect for this year's historic UGSS elections. Again, we want to congratulate him. And please, I invite you to share your experiences.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's hope this time works. Yeah. Um, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have the opportunity to express and share and reflect on what the electoral campaign looked like for me, and how we went about. And when I say we, I mean my team and I. How we went about deciding and determining how we would campaign and eventually how we would come to the elections. So as I started earlier, firstly, we had to change our perception and our understanding of what campaigning would look like this time around. We've noticed that prior, the regular mode of campaigning on campus would be to come to campus to share out flyers and posters and interact with the people on the ground. But when the University of Guyana moved to an online or mostly an online-based method of teaching and academia, we realized that campaigning would look just slightly different for us. So we launched the campaign firstly with a video that was published on social media, and we understood the importance of social media and the impact that would have on UG students and the student population as a whole. So we launched with a video, and we had the opportunity, thankfully, to meet with more than 200 students in the space of 2 weeks or so. And those meetings were solely online based. So though we did not come to campus, we believe we still had a larger impact because we met with classes on Zoom. We listened to their concerns. We identified some solutions that we could possibly implement as we went along. And so that was a main thing that we had to understand. So as I mentioned, we launched with the campaign video that expressed exactly what we wanted to do. And then following that main campaign video, we started to release some endorsements. So these endorsements came from students of the University of Guyana, from different faculties and different departments, practically endorsing me for the presidential candidacy, endorsing me for president. And those things mainly, I believe, catapulted person's understanding of what was happening, one, and the position that we wanted to take if we were given the opportunity, or if I was given the opportunity to lead as president of UGSS. So we launched a number of campaign videos on social media. We know people are big on social media now, particularly Facebook, in our realm. And so those were some of the things that we did. We had a particular endorsement video that came from the president of the University of the West Indies Student Guild as well. And so I think that as well played a major role, but it was mainly focusing on the internet, focusing on how we can reach the masses through social media and through those mechanisms. So those were the two main things. One of the other things that we learned, or that I learned during campaigning, was the importance of timing when we spoke to students, the timing of when we released endorsement videos as well. So we actually did some studies as it relates to the best times to post on social media, the times where the larger classes would meet. So we know when to meet with classes, who to meet with, and so we could reach a larger audience in that regard. So we learned the importance of timing and the releasing of information as well. And I mentioned earlier, we focused on virtual meetings more than we focused on in-person meetings. I know some of the other candidates, they took the opportunity and rightfully so to meet with students in person. But on our end, we felt as though it was more effective to a large extent to meet after classes just concluded. So what we did, if a class was from 6 to 7:15, we would go in at 7:15 or 5:55 or 5:45, just to meet the class before or immediately after the class. So we get everybody in the class, everybody that would be there. So we have a large portion of people. Moving forward to election day. Election day was quite smooth, and I think we had a plan for election day as well in terms of the dissemination of information. We wanted to keep the electorate informed as it relates to how they would have how voting would have happened on elections day. So we posted a lot of material. UG did an amazing job with the video tutorials and so on. And so we shared those on our platforms as well. So persons who are following us can have that information. And on elections day as well, we did a lot of screenshots of persons that would send immediately after they vote. You would get that receipts that your vote was accepted and so on. So we posted a lot of those as well, showing that people were involved in the process. People were getting active with voting and taking part in the process. And so that was another big thing that we did. Voting in general was very smooth for us, but at least on our end and the feedback that we received, it was an extremely smooth process. Some persons did say that they didn't receive an email, I guess for some reason or the other. But from looking at it from a macro perspective, voting was very smooth. One of the things that we hoped to have, and maybe this can be implemented in the future or not, is to have everybody be seeing the live tabulation of votes, so we can as well keep track of what's happening, to know if we need to continue our campaign, get more people to vote, whatever the case may be at that point in time, so we know what to do in those short hours or few hours that would be left. So those are my brief remarks. I once again want to say thank you to the administration of the University of Guyana for the role that they played in ensuring that this democratic process happened, and to ensure that the students got the opportunity to exercise their franchises, as some of the speakers before me said, and so that we can have progress and development within our student society and the overall development of student life here at the University of Guyana. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, President-elect Gill. I'm getting excited for the GYAFF segment, the real conversation, the back and forth. So thank you. And thank you also for keeping to 5 to 7 minutes. I want to invite now the lone female presidential candidate to share her experiences. She is a third-year geography major here at the University of Guyana. She's the current president of the UG Geographical Society. She was a presidential candidate at the recently concluded historic election that we're talking about today. She expresses passion and interest in geography. She wants to join geographers all around the world and help to understand cultures, rediscover history, and contribute to the battle against climate change. In doing so, she also hopes to expand the way this type of thinking is used as a tool for solving problems in Guyana. Ms. Christina Prasad, I want to invite you to share your experiences.
Okay, good evening, everyone that joined online and with us in person. I hope you're in a comfort zone tonight because you're online and we have limited person here. So first off, I learned a lot during the election process. For me, it was a learning process. It was a process that I gained experience from, and I actually get exposed to certain faculties and what these faculties do. So overall, it was a learning experience for me. So when I was first told about the elections and what it really entails is that I was curious and I undertake the task of actually getting persons and reaching out to students. So in my campaign or what I did in my time span is that I look forward to students and meeting students, and I did this on many platforms, such as I started with my faculty first, which is the Faculty of Earth and Environmental Sciences. And then after I go on to the social media platform whereby I reach out to students on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platform. Also educating them a little bit more about the student society, because when I reach out to these students, most of them was like, what is the student society? We have a student society on campus. So for them, it was a learning experience for the audience that I meet out to, and which was great because I get to spread that knowledge to them. The process of the election from the day of nomination on to the day of casting your ballot, it was simple and it was very straightforward. The detail that was provided by the University of Guyana administrative staff that was behind the entire election was actually simple, and the word was very straightforward. So on the day of election, when I opened the email, the link, I I immediately think of it as very much efficient, because to have students come in on campus would have been a hell of a task to organize. So it was efficient and it was less time consuming, because the moment you open that link, 2 to 3 seconds, you click whichever candidate you choose to lead you, and then you get your receipt. So it was simple, it was very straightforward, and um, we look forward to more interactive session from the students, because what we found is that online we had a large amount of voters that we would have had in person. So lastly, before I leave the podium, I would like to say thank you to everyone that support me through my experience, through my journey of running as UG Student Society president as a candidate, and I appreciate it highly. Still will be in contact with you guys because I'm still your faculty representative for Earth and Environmental Sciences. So you'll be seeing me around. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Prasad. I heard the use of Instagram and so on. I must admit I'm not that old. I do have Instagram, but I discovered recently that I have an old version of Instagram. Apparently, I can't do the reply in chat thing. So when I was like, how everybody can do this and I can't do this? Oh, your version of Instagram is outdated. So, I know that young people use all of this social media. Also, Christina is in a special case, as she mentioned, because she was both a presidential candidate and a candidate for faculty rep. So although the elections ran at the same time, they were in fact two different sections of the ballot. One might say even two different ballots. You were electing a president and you were electing a faculty rep at the same time. So every student, as I think Oren mentioned in his presentation, the structure of the ballot was that there was the half for electing the presidential candidates and the half for electing the faculty representatives. The faculty representatives, however, had a criteria that of the total votes cast, in order to be elected, and the people with the top 3 votes were the ones who were elected, you had to also secure a minimum of 1/6 of those total votes in order to be elected. So in fact, some faculties were not able to elect a faculty representative. So that's what Christina referred to in the last part of her remarks. I want to invite now, finally, another presidential candidate, Mr. Jamal Kunda Thornhill, who is he was one of the presidential candidates in these historic elections. He's a public management major here at the University of Guyana, an administrator in the Tactical Services Unit of the Guyana Police Force, where he exhibits excellence in planning, organizing, controlling, and monitoring. He's also an executive member of the Guyana Police Association. Mr. Thornhill is the recipient of a number of academic service and merit awards and considers himself a servant leader. He was, as I said, a presidential candidate in these historic elections. Mr. Thornhill, please share with us your experiences.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Norrell, for that warm introduction. Before I begin, I was just chatting with the UGSS president-elect, and I was telling him, I got to remember that this isn't a debate. And if it were, then that speech that you just gave, I don't think that I can top that, right? Nonetheless, before I go forward, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who turned up and participated in the elections, the University of Guyana Student Society elections. And special thanks to those persons who would have voted for me, right? Special thanks to them. I'd also like to save a special opportunity to say thank you to Commissioner of Police, Mr. Clifford Hickins, for the support that he would have given me throughout this process. He's always been involved in youth empowerment and youth development. So I would like to say special thanks to him. The election in general, I just remember that this is a GYAFF, right? As you said, Norrell, it's a GYAFF. The elections in general, like some of my colleagues said, it was fun in my understanding. It was a process where everybody, all university students, could have take part in it as long as you're registered, obviously, wherever they are. It doesn't matter which geographic locations you are. And that is what this software, this voting in a virtual world would have done for us. It was sad in my view to see though Ms. King mentioned that there has seen a rise in voters turnout. I think Mr. Bernard mentioned that the university has about a little over 10,000 students, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it is sad to know that we don't want to have to come physically to exercise the right. I mean, it's a right to choose to vote and not to vote. But I believe that a lot of people would be more interested in voting in these elections, whether it's universities elections or, elections anywhere that probably might go on virtually. And it was really sad to know that we did not have as much voters turnout. And I would love to see that moving forward. A lot of people coming out to vote. 10,000 students, more than 10,000 students, and that is the numbers we see. As my colleague mentioned, the president-elect, congratulations, by the way. Campaigning definitely has to take a different path. Majority of the students are online. Majority of the classes, rather, are done online. Yes, you will have a few students on campuses, both campuses and stuff like that. And it was really good not only to campaign online, but it's really good to go out in the fields and meet those students, right? So I've done campaign both in the virtual space and the physical space. I could remember 3 times I went to Barbados, and then, like he mentioned, it's really important to choose a time in which you go or in which you campaign, especially if you're doing it in the virtual space. And so in the physical space, that's the same method I had to do. I find out from persons in Barbados when they will have large classes, so I'll know how to plan my visit, what time to plan my visit, and so forth. So one of the large classes is done on Mondays. So I wanted to get there and reach the students, because like I said, it's very important not only to have your campaign done online, but to have it done in the fields as well. So generally, the election process, in my view, is good. On the day of the elections, when we received that email, it took about perhaps 15 seconds, 15 to 20 seconds, if so much. It was that simple. I mean, I feel good to know that I didn't have to travel from wherever I am to say I'm coming on campus and cast my ballot. I did it on the move. Voting open, I stopped and I placed my vote. Less than seconds, and my vote was counted. You understand? So voting in a virtual space is something that we definitely should do moving forward. And one of the things I would like to point out, Mr. Hines and others, is if when the presidential, when the candidates, if we can have like some photos shown next to the candidate, that's something we can probably explore moving forward. The election teams and so forth, we can explore moving forward with these virtual elections. Yeah, so the election process was very good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed everything before, during, and after these elections and so forth. And we should definitely look towards having more virtual elections in this country moving forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jamal Conda Thornhill. And again, I want to congratulate all of the candidates for running really excellent campaigns and for participating in really history making at the university and the innovation. And I really wanted to acknowledge that. At this point in the program, we opened with an expert. We want to close this segment with an expert. And we recognize we are running behind time. So we want to move soon after that final presentation to a conversation with you who are joining us online and those who are here who might want to ask questions also. So I want to invite Mr. Orad Fisher. He's an elections expert who worked for over 23 years with the Electoral Commission of Jamaica as Chief Elections Officer, where in that role, he was Chief Elections Officer for about 10 years. There, he successfully administered 4 national elections. He has participated in numerous election observer missions across the world and headed several CARICOM missions. He has provided consulting services to several international agencies, including the Commonwealth Secretariat, the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, and the International Republican Institute. Mr. Fisher is currently in Guyana supporting the work being undertaken by the International Republican Institute in Guyana. Mr. Fisher, we want to invite you to share your remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And good evening, everyone, members on the platform and those persons joining online. I promise to be very brief in my remarks, given the time constraints. As was mentioned, I am a consultant with International Republican Institute, supporting their work in Guyana. And I can tell you that the team working in Guyana is very youth-oriented, and therefore was very happy to be able to support and to participate in this venture for the students of the University of Guyana. Now, I want to congratulate the persons at the university who conceptualized and executed this whole idea of electronic remote voting. I think it is an indication of the future where more and more technology will be used in the electoral process. However, I have to be very practical in responding to some of the things that you actually used and how it can be translated in a broader context. So for example, request for real-time tabulation is something that would go against the grain of election results because it would tend to influence a person's decision. For example, if they saw that their candidate was losing, they might be less inclined to go to vote. So the results is something that you get at the end of the process. And I'm not being critical, but I was just wondering when I heard what the presidential candidate would have done had she won both, had she succeeded in both her elections, if she was president and faculty rep. So I'm saying that you're doing a wonderful job, but as you said, it's work in progress. And I'm sure as you go along, you'll be able to iron out the kinks, so to speak. But I'll just speak very briefly on how election in the broader sphere, at the national level, utilizes technology. So for example, in the registration process, to ensure that you have a clean list, a list without duplicates, the use of biometrics, fingerprints is used. So it's a little different from persons who are registered on a campus and are therefore automatically on the list. So the whole issue of persons attempting to register more than once is an issue that has to be dealt with. And therefore biometrics is one aspect that is used to prevent duplication by the cross-matching of the fingerprints of all electors who register to vote. In the pre-election period as well, persons are usually able to check for their names online and closer to the elections to actually identify their place of poll. Technology is also used in the delimitation of boundaries, and the GIS technology has been utilized in a number of jurisdictions. On election day itself, the identification of the electors is a very, very critical part of the process to prevent personation or persons voting for other persons. And therefore, there are various means of identifying persons, which includes the use of photographs, in certain jurisdictions, the use of fingerprints. However, there are a few jurisdictions where electronic voting actually takes place. But in looking at electronic voting, in all instances that I am aware of, the electors are still required to go to the place of poll in order to be properly identified. And there are a number of issues that would require that. So for example, the secrecy of the vote is something that is critical in the electoral process. And therefore, if you were to vote remotely using your computer or your phones, or elderly parents, grandparents, whoever it is, who are not able to manage the technology, the younger person will say, okay, let me do it for you. and they would actually know how that person voted or be able to influence the vote and maybe even vote for that person against that person's choice. So the whole idea of treating also, where persons are able to pay you to vote. If you're able to vote from your phone, the candidate could actually look to see that you're voting the correct way. However, if you are voting in secret, that candidate would be taking a great risk in paying you to vote because you could collect the money, but if you vote in secret, he would not be able to verify whether or not you actually voted for him or her. There's also the whole issue of trust. And that is an issue in Guyana, the Caribbean, and across the world, where there is there's a lack of trust, and therefore persons who are not comfortable with the use of technology will think that something is at play. And that is also another factor that limits the use of technology in the voting process itself. And there are persons who actually fear technology. In other words, they are apprehensive because they think that they don't want to embarrass themselves. Even if the system is very simple, just the thought of having to use that computer or use that phone to vote can be a deterrent for some people. And finally, when we look at the use of technology, the equipment that we acquire, one must also bear in mind the issue of obsolescence. Because using technology, for example, across the entire country requires a very, very huge investment. And so while it, to my mind, will be the way to go in the future, because I think that younger generation will be more comfortable with the technology, they'll be more comfortable or less inclined to go and stand in line. But I must be honest with you that certain aspects, to my mind, are still some distance away. But I am happy for what you're doing because it is beginning the conversation, it is beginning the process. And to my mind, from little acorns, huge oaks grow. And so this process being started amongst the young people of Guyana dictates that down the road, as the future unfolds, as the generation that exists becomes more and more comfortable with technology, then more and more technology will be able to be infused into the system, but it's going to be a process. And there are a number of issues that would have to be dealt with prior to voting from your devices. For example, the whole issue of somebody being forced to vote a particular way, somebody being paid to vote a particular way, and so on. But I want to congratulate you again and to say that on behalf of IRI, I'm the consultant. There are staff members locally and in DC that supports the program in Guyana that we're happy to be associated with it. And we hope that from this, other things will develop where the generation evolves to be more comfortable in using the available technology to simplify the process. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. I think that was, you asked some very useful questions, and it's a good starting point to get the conversation rolling. So it took us a while to get here, but we're at that segment where we can really have a GYAFF. You know, we've heard from the experts, we've heard from the candidates, we've heard about the technology and the process. So we're going to have a little bit of a conversation now around those things. So I'm going to, as one of my teachers used to say, decrease from the podium. I have a second microphone, and we're going to have sort of a conversation, a free-flowing conversation for about 15 minutes, which I will ask some questions. You're free to raise additional questions that all of you might address, but also we have questions that will come from the audience online. We want to invite you online. If you have a question, if you would like to ask a question, that you raise your virtual hand on the Zoom platform. You will be identified. You can type your question in the chat also, and that will be read aloud for the panel to hear. But if you would like to also read your question yourself, you could do that in the chat, in the Zoom application and Zoom platform. For those of you, we have a very limited audience here, deliberately so. We wanted to have this conversation really be this multicast, again, using innovation. Those of you who are here and want to ask questions, please feel free to do so. We'll pass the microphone to you. Okay? So thank you. I'm getting a signal about the microphone. It's working? This one? Okay. So just 1 minute and then we'll. Oh, to hear the, okay, for the questions online. Okay, great. So we're going to get straight to the conversation now. All right, so rapid fire conversation. And I really want to start with the candidates. You talked a lot about the use of social media, and I wanted to touch a little bit more on that. I'm very curious about the use of memes and how you felt that that helped or didn't help your campaign process. Where did you use that? What was the response like to meme technology? Because it's a kind of technology. Was that a feature in your campaign process? Anybody can take the question.
Well, Mr. Hines, the campaign, like I said, the entire elections was online. It's virtual. So you wanted to be creative in using things that can be shared in the virtual space. One of the things that I came up with an idea, well, I don't know how to create stickers, so I had to send it to one of my friends. I said, you know what? A sticker is less annoying. People loves that. Rather than me just every minute, I just send in a photo or something. I said, I'm going to create a sticker. So I created a sticker with my name, vote Jamal Thornhill for UGSS, and the date and everything. So with this sticker now, it's less annoying, and it could be shared all over on the WhatsApp groups, on Facebook, on Instagram, merely anywhere. So it was very important that you find creative ways in which you can campaign virtually, and you can reach your voters, reach the masses, and so forth. Yeah.
Good evening once again. So what was interesting is that after then is when I find out the sticker was circulating with the other candidates. So I'm not sure if that's your campaign strategy, but anyways, mostly what I reach out to my public or the other students in University of Ghana, my main platform that I used was WhatsApp, and that was a little bit more efficient because it's the person direct contact information, and we know as long the person's story or number, you can see, or they can see what you're posting, the updates and everything. So it was much more easier to just post a status and the person view it, or your requires students that support you view it. So that's how, or that was my main source of campaigning, direct contact. So just after the election, or when the election finished, I still had contact with these persons, and I still hear concerns, so that it's helpful for Shakwa now as president. So as those complaints come to me, I hand it over to him and we solve it as an executive body. So that's how I go about doing it.
Right. So I didn't use memes at all for campaigning. I like the candidate said, we saw some memes after, but it wasn't the, I don't know if anybody else, but it wasn't a part of a campaign strategy. Unfortunately, I feel as though memes have evolved, unfortunately, to a place that can sometimes become disparaging. And you don't want to, at least for me, I wouldn't want to cross the line in relation to obviously remaining respectful with the other candidates and still being competitive. So memes, that wasn't something that we use. In terms of social media, one of the biggest things that I know worked for us was, and I think Nishida alluded to it, one of the biggest things that worked for us was the use of WhatsApp and Facebook, but not just posting on your status alone, because I've realized that my circle of influence is only so big. But when you get other people to share and to post on their status and to comment and stuff like that, their circle of influence is now involved, and those persons, their circle of influence is also involved. So you have a somewhat of a trickle down effect when you use social media in the right way, and you're able to reach a larger audience when you strategically place your posts and your statements, and you have people use social media as well to support the campaign. So those are some main things for me, how social media was used. I wanted to take the opportunity, if I can, to also record that I am of the belief that the University of Guyana's Facebook page and could have played a larger role in the disseminating of information for all of the candidates. I noticed, I think on the UGSS page for the 2019 elections, I saw a lot of posters and flyers being posted on that page itself. And so everybody got an opportunity to reach that audience as well with their flyers or videos or whatever. I think if the University of Ghana also used their Facebook page, and the Student Society at that time had also used their Facebook page, we would have had a larger reach and more of an influence. So I think that is something that can also be worked on as well for elections going forward.
Thank you. Sort of building on that, I want to direct this question to you, Kadasi. A lot of the trend now is about the use of social media, especially as the young people have identified, as these youth leaders have identified, as a tool for advocacy. What is your take on the role of social media, not only as a tool for campaigning and reaching audiences, but also as a tool for advocacy? And how do you think that it might play a role going forward, especially for the student society?
Thank you very much, Narwell. While I was listening to our students reps, I was thinking about asking the president about, okay, so now that you've been elected, how is it that you maintain that that connection with the students, right? Throughout your tenure, because what happens is that the students are accustomed to seeing the presidential, seeing the presidents. They come to the classes, they're always on campus. Students can go find the office. If there's a problem, etc. How do you want to do something like that? Now the question is really, really important. In terms of social media, because as they said themselves, you heard how much the importance of social media, right? In them, in terms of them, reaching other students, campaigning, etc. Now the thing is, is it social media? Well, is it gonna just stop there? Just focusing on those, everyday students issues. Our students are gonna use social media now. To have a greater say, to have a greater voice. On so many issues. Whether social justice issues, the environment, etc. how that is going to play out, I mean, is is going to be very, very important because if you look at the political culture of not only Guyana, I mean, but the rest of the region, especially, we kind of become disengaged after elections. Right. I mean, so that we have to stay, we have to hold the feet to the fire. We have to hold them accountable. And how students, I mean, are going to do that, I mean, with social media, it's going to be very interesting going forward. But in terms of, understanding, I mean, the importance of social media, well, it goes without saying that, that is the perhaps the most important medium going forward. And look, Norville talked earlier about memes, etc. But I still believe picture is worth 1,000 words. And when students, for example, they don't get certain action, they write a letter, I mean, or they do something, I mean, on social media, the belief is they're going to be, the administration is going to respond very quickly to that, right? So we see that, social media can be, so much. However, as I said, when I started, things, we have to look at, both sides of the equation. And it could be, we have to harness it, I mean, for the good. We understand, the students talked about, crossing a line. And, you have to be extremely careful, right? I mean, in terms of setting the tone, right? When you interact with the students, etc. So that's so many opportunities. I mean, so much potential of social media. It's about us harnessing that for the good.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to contribute. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know Mr. Series asked a very specific question. I'll take the opportunity to respond. So as I indicated earlier, social media has played an important role in campaigning, and I believe it has to play that same role even post elections. Because and as you rightfully said, we get disengaged, and then you end up in a position where the students feel as though nothing is happening and the student society isn't doing anything. So they campaign big and proud for the votes. But now when the voting finish, you don't hear, you don't see, you don't know what's happening. So social media has to play a big role in that regard, ensuring that the students are kept informed of the progress, the proactivity of the student society. And so that's point one. In terms of maintaining communication of issues and the concerns of students and maintaining that communication, one of the things that the student, in its unofficial capacity, I can say, one of the things that the student society, because we've had the opportunity as the elected faculty reps and I to just have a brief preliminary discussion, and we've identified a particular method that we're hoping to use where we establish something specific that will deal with communication between students and the executive and the student society as a whole. And so communication, ensuring that we maintain discussions and ensure that we are accessible is going to be a very, very critical and important component of our leadership from the perspective of student society 2022-2023.
Thank you. I think that's a useful segue into the next conversation. I think you, Mr. Fisher, sort of introduced some useful considerations. We coached a lot of this conversation in terms of this new normal, this new hybrid normal. My question directed to you, Mr. Fisher, is there hybrid elections? How would that work? The candidates talked about the geographic reach of the online voting tool, that people can vote from anywhere. Some people are in places that they vote on the go, but there are a lot of people who might have been in places where solutions for them look. Will they still use paper-based ballots and electronic votes? How might that look in the future? How might this hybrid voting apparatus look in the future? Is a question to you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you very much for a very interesting question. Now, in terms of methods of voting, I think generally it's either one or the other. I am not saying that it does not exist, but I've never actually come across a system in my travels where half of the population would vote, say, electronically, and well, I think on the other half by paper. Or maybe no, I remember, for example, in the US elections, I did observe the presidential election, and I think we are observed in Virginia, they're actually doing electronic voting. And I think there are other areas within the state or the country where persons were using the paper ballot. But I think that the US is a very unique situation in that states run their own elections, as opposed to, say, a country like Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, where, it's the same system that is used right across. So yes, there can be the dual system, but presently, what a lot of countries have been doing is to do identification, electronic identification, where you have devices where the persons are identified using their fingerprints, and then they are given ballots, and they vote in the traditional manner. In terms of tabulation, there are systems where the ballots are passed through a machine that does the tabulation so that at the end of the day you have it, and in most, you have the traditional method. But in terms of the consideration for electronic voting, the other thing that one would have to consider, whether it would be a standalone system in each polling station where the voter's name appears on the list only in that polling station, and so the voter has to go to that polling station. That is usually less susceptible to hacking, for example. However, if it's connected and the voter can go anywhere to vote, then the prospect of that system being hacked is greater. But I think at present, most jurisdictions, persons have to go to vote within the polling stations they are assigned, and where electronic voting does take place, it is usually supported by a backup system where once you vote, you have a receipt that comes
And we are going to, and that will be the final question for us. I want to give the panel here the opportunity to share any particular ideas that came out. Part of what this GYAFF is about also is sort of taking lessons from this experience. And we've got a few already. We also got some suggestions. One suggestion was that potentially the face of the candidate should be on the electronic ballot so that people know who they're voting for. We also learned that the technology allowed persons who were visually impaired to have the screen scraper read what is actually on the electronic ballot for that individual. So those types of facilities and features, I think, for sure are useful. But we also have this question of how do we implement this beyond an institutional setting, where there are lots of controls within an institutional setting, and perhaps the interests are not as large or varied as it might be outside of institutional settings. So those were very useful comments. So in closing, if we're ready for the final question, we will have our technical person read the question, or it's the person is going to give the question himself?
I'll read the question. The
Please go ahead
question
and
was from
read the question.
Ganesh, and he was asking what were the other
I don't think we hear.
considerations for students with disabilities.
What other? Could you?
Considerations for the online platform when it comes to students with disabilities.
So the question is for you, what other considerations did the online platform have for students with disabilities?
Did you say that the question was posed by Ganesh, is it?
Accessibility.
Oh, I
Question
thought
was
you
about
mentioned the name of the
accessibility.
person who did it. Right. So, as I mentioned earlier, we did reach out to election body to ensure that their platform supports W3C accessibility standards, and so the W3C. That's the organization, the World Wide Web Consortium. They usually manage the standards for the web, and so accessibility is one of their standards. And so we ensured that the platform could be accessed by persons who have especially visual disabilities, so that they would be able to use the platform and to vote themselves. We've seen, of course, in our testing, we would have seen what the email is like. The instructions are minimal, and therefore the link is very clear there. There's basically only one link there for you to click. And so it makes it should be quite simple for someone who's visually impaired and using that as assistive technology to cast their vote.
Thank you. Was that the only, thank you so much. Thank you, those who are still with us online as we begin to wrap up this conversation. I want to give each of you an opportunity. Unfortunately, it will have to be a short opportunity, maybe 30 seconds or so, to say some closing thoughts on either the election process, the innovation there, or you can extend to the larger society any observations or lessons. I will start with you, Kadasi, because you're closer.
That's quite okay. And what I want to close with is that, the issue of the political culture of a society. My colleagues' point about, us designing a system that, that we feel comfortable, and, which are going to reach the objectives, that we've set ourselves. You cannot overemphasize that particular point. Different cultures, are going to approach it differently. In terms of how they want, the system that they want for themselves. In terms of, how far it's going to be merged with technology, or stay as the traditional, system, etc. But I want to, emphasize that, yet again. When it comes to the political culture of societies, that's going to play a really, really, large role, right, in determining how far we go with this technology. Thank you.
Right. So I think for me, my closing remarks are going to be technology based. And of course, I have a special interest in the applications that the university runs, inclusive of election body and our other platforms. I want to emphasize the importance of your contact details. If you weren't reached during this process, it could be because of your email box being full or it not being spelled correctly, things of that nature. I want to emphasize those things because this is the way the university is going to reach you. I know at some point the student society is going to ask us to reach the student population with some request or the other, and we need to be able to reach you. So please ensure that information is up to date and it is accurate. Right? This our system, almost our entire system depends upon that communication in a lot of ways. Thanks.
I'd just like to close by congratulating the university on this initiative, and I am convinced that more and more technology will be infused in the electoral process, not only in Guyana, but across the entire world, and the time will very well come, may very well come, when electronic or remote voting is the way that things are done, okay? And therefore, this initiation, this first step, especially amongst the youth, is very significant because, as we all say, youth, they are the future. Thank you.
My closing remarks is, first off, I want to thank all the students at the UG, both Taint and Turkey campus. Without you guys, this wouldn't have been possible, and the new executive body wouldn't have been put in place. We look forward to working with you as UG Student Society, and we look forward to just not getting your votes, to actually helping and assisting you as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to use my few seconds, Mr. Hines, no, 30 seconds, to encourage students and persons who are listening to get involved in advocacy, get involved in representation, not just for yourself, but for your community, for your friends. I think it is very important that as young people, we step up and play the role that we need to play so that we can see the world that we want to see. And I'll echo the sentiments made by FEE's faculty rep, that the UGSS will continue to work in the best interest of the students. And with the plans and things that we've laid out, we ensure that the overall life here at the University of Guyana is one that is improved, and one that even foreign and international students would want to come and experience as well. So that's what we're working towards.
All right, thank you. I don't know how much I can say after listening to all of you go before me. So I would like to say personally thanks to everyone for the opportunity that I have been given, not just only to run as a candidate in the UGSS elections, but for this GYAFF, I mean, there's some things that I learned here and I will take with me. Definitely how us as people can improve in this whole process and everything. As Shekwan mentioned, I don't know why is it that I always call him Shakil. Probably you should change your name. As Shekwan mentioned, people should get involved in these types of process. It is important that when these things come up, you want to participate as much as you can in the process. So not only your voice will be heard by a way of a vote or however we see it, but you'll be able to hold our leaders accountable when they're elected in office, right? So it's very important that you get involved. It's very important that you participate in everything. You understand? So young people, get involved in everything. As he mentioned, advocacy, you get involved in it. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity again.
Thank you. And finally, we're at the end of this GYAFF. I think it was useful. It has been recorded. It's been broadcasted for the first time. Multicast, we want to, of course, say thank to that awesome technical team. Of course, we're going to then produce this, and it, as the university does, it's available continually. I want to invite Ms. Yasmin Fazil to the podium at this point to officially raise a vote of thanks on behalf of all of us. Ms. Fazil is currently the Community Service Director at the Rotaract Club of the University of Guyana. She's also the former president of the University of Guyana's Economic Society, really a community force, so to speak. Yasmin has been consistent in terms of her involvement in student activities at the campus. We also want to congratulate her as she is a graduate, she will be graduating at this year's convocation. So we want to congratulate her also for reaching that milestone as a graduate in the economics program. Yasmin, please take the podium.
A pleasant good evening, everyone. I'm usually nervous, as usual. But to be quite frank on this session, I hope you have learned as much as I have. I've been on this campus a very long time, and I believe giving gratitude and not expressing it like wrapping, it's like wrapping a present and not giving it. So I was deemed it a great honor and a privilege to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the organizing committee of GYAFF. I'm extremely thankful to everyone who have attended here in person and on our virtual platform. I'd like to thank our Vice Chancellor, Professor Paloma Mohammed Martin. While she was not here, she's made several things happen for us. Several may be an understatement. I'd like to thank the Registrar, Dr. Nigel Graves-Andy, for his support. The PACE team in support with our sponsors, who are the Institute for Human Resilience, Strategic Security and the Future, which we know as the ISSHRF. That's a long abbreviation, but you get accustomed to it. Then the UG Broadcasting Service, also the University of Guyana Student Society, and especially IRI, which stands for International Republican Institute. So, Mr. Fisher, who is the election manager expert, thank you for being here. With your expertise, we definitely learned of some fall shorts that we can correct, but I'm happy to say that you did give us an indication of the future. Thank you. I know you also mentioned biometric use for duplication, and I'm sure our new president will take that into consideration. I want to thank Ms. Alexandra Panzuluri. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name or butchering it, I'm sorry. Panzurelli. Yes, I got it. Thank you. She is the project manager for this organization. Ms. Dorota Rizzi, who is the country director. Sarah Barat, who is the local program manager. I would like to thank our speakers, Mr. Calvin Bernard, who is the deputy director for ISSHRF. Hope by now you get the abbreviation name. Mr. Sirez, who is the lecturer in the Department of Government under the Faculty of Social Sciences. Thank you so much for giving us your view. So Mr. Sirez was the first who added the new normal or the new method of learning. And he himself gave his experience. And with that, I guess we can use our way forward for improvement. Ms. Daniela King, who is the Senior Assistant Registrar, she was able to give us a detailed overview on the election process. Thank you. Mr. Aaron Paris, who is the Senior ICT Engineer for our Software Service Department, who was able to give us a detailed presentation on the voting system, which was done the first time in history in our university. Thank you. Mr. Shaquan Gill, the president-elect candidate. He mentioned that social media play a very important part in the campaigning, and so it should continue to play a vital part in the student outreach. Thank you for that. Ms. Christine Prasad, our presidential candidate, or as we call her, the lone female, she mentioned experience and exposure, which I think is very good for one, female, one, and two, someone who was not able to make the presidential position, but also had something to take away so she can share with others. Mr. Jamal Thornhill, the presidential candidate, he talks about the virtual world, and campaigning definitely had to take a different path. Thank you for your input. Finally, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Narwell Hines, without your position here, we know that this would not have been a smooth process. So thank you for your time, and thank you everyone else who've took their time out of their busy schedule to be here today, to give us an entire brief and a great experience in learning information that will benefit not just our campus, but beyond our campus. Thank you. So I did mention our PACE team. We have our Ms. Tara and our radio, head of the radio, which is the radio service for UG, Ms. Keisha. Thank you also for accommodating our live streaming and our virtual audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Indeed, a lot of work went into making this possible, and a lot of people had a role to play. So we want to thank all of the members of the PACE team. Already, Yasmin has singled out Tara, and there are others in the office, Cheryl, who is an important part of this, Leonard, Joelle, Dr. Collins, a lot of folks, Michelle, of course, the Vice Chancellor herself, a lot of folks had to be involved to make this possible, because we were involved in this from the onset and meeting with the teams consistently, the software services team, meeting with the elections management team, meeting with the candidates. It was a whole range of things. So we're finally happy to bring this to you, this GYAFF, about some lessons learned, and we hope that this will be available on the electronic medium for people to view in the future. Thank you so much, and we're signing out. I don't know how to say that when you're multicasting. You can say, what do you say? End? How do you say that when you're on TV? That's a wrap. Oh, that's what they say. That's a wrap, folks. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.